Over the last 10 years, there's been a significant increase of online content pertaining to topics by creators expressing their criticisms and even feelings of disenfranchisement about the way society, government, and mainstream media has gone, and feelings that their collective voice and rights are being silenced and taken away. A lot of this content critiques their perceived zeitgeist of the times and why certain individuals find the general mentality of the opposite sex to be quote unquote toxic and negatively influenced by media, government, and society at large, and making relationships difficult or impossible for them to continue seeking. This type of content expressing criticism, disappointment, and even anger over the state of political, social, and relationship norms and trends is often referred to as red pill content, quote unquote, a term popularized from the 1999 The Matrix movie, where the character Morpheus presents the protagonist Neo an option to swallow a red pill that will give him awareness about the reality he was blinded to and found initially hard to accept. Red pill sentiment is usually expressed by those who tend to have more conservative views against mostly what is considered quote unquote liberal views and talking points. A lot of creators of this type of content are popular and provide online communities where those with similar views can commiserate, support, and even influence one another. The information by many in these communities tend to consider their views harsh truths, quote unquote, about society that's not easily accepted by many who don't see societal trends as negatively as they do. Now, what have I told you? There's another pill with a growing following with an even harder, more existential critique of reality itself called the black pill. Red pill and black pill views can often conflate and even overlap, and individuals with either viewpoints might consider their stance red pill or black pill, quote unquote. But make no mistake, black pill doesn't just critique aspects about society and worldly affairs they find negative, but the very nature of existence and reality itself is seen as negative overall. Modern time philosophers like Arthur Schopenhauer, Emil Cioran, and to a lesser extent Friedrich Nietzsche can easily be considered black pillars, quote unquote, from centuries ago. Now I said Nietzsche to a lesser extent because while Schopenhauer considered this reality a creation from something irrational, misguided, and blind, and Cioran saw this reality as a mistake or accident altogether, Nietzsche was not a nihilist in the sense he's often mistaken for. Nietzsche did feel nihilism would be a beneficial viewpoint, but not the end viewpoint. He saw nihilism as sort of a necessary phase humanity at large must go through to abandon their old socially stagnant, long-held views about God and religion he felt was holding back the evolution of the culture and of humanity at large. He saw nihilism as a deconstructive phase towards another step of humanity evolving into a more enlightened, progressive state, mainly due to humanity's collective suffering of what he called, quote unquote, the Übermensch as a collective. The Übermensch would be contrasted against what he called, quote unquote, the last man, which is basically the collective of individuals who refuse or are unable to evolve and promote the evolution of the Übermensch. Nietzsche views have long been misrepresented and misappropriated by groups and regimes that promote nihilism and classism. And for Nietzsche, nihilism did serve a purpose and a meaning, no pun intended. And though I personally do not see the view of nihilism itself as inherently negative, I do understand how it can feed negative mentalities. But let's go even further back with the black pill content. In Christian doctrine and belief, there's a somewhat convoluted teaching that the world as we know it was usurped and now controlled by a malevolent divine being simply known as Satan or the devil. In Christian belief, the world was created perfectly, but after a chain of misguided or guided events, depending on how you look at it, the folly of mankind and the evil intentions of this Satan being somehow made the original benevolent creator relinquish control of the cosmos and allow Satan to control everything he created instead. We read in the New Testament scripture how Satan was able to offer Jesus the world to tempt him. In Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4, Satan is referred to as the God of this world. And other New Testament scriptures, quote unquote, teach how Satan and or evil forces govern the world, according to verses in letters attributed to the person commonly known as the Apostle Paul, who was the heavyweight in forming popular Christian doctrine as we know it today. And ask any Christian believer who they believe controls the world, the vast majority, with good conviction, will say it's the evil Satan. Talk about a black pill. This belief has some cognitive inconsistencies from other things they believe, but that's another topic for another time I don't plan on having. But to have a doctrine and belief of an evil force controlling the world is an acknowledgement of the dark state of suffering, injustice, and affairs of the world we find ourselves in. And speaking of Paul, his teachings of dark forces controlling the world falls in line with another group of black pill rock stars, simply known as the Gnostics. The Gnostics are considered by most Christians heretics today. But know that during the early 1st and 2nd century development of Christianity, Gnostics were simply known as Christians. So it would have been anachronistic to call them heretics around that time. Gnostic Christians later became known as heretical once, quote unquote, orthodox doctrines of Christianity were established over the course of centuries afterwards through numerous councils and debates with political and power dynamic considerations as well as theological. In fact, the Gnostic version of Christianity was so popular and accepted at one time that according to 2nd century Christian author Tertullian, the church moved to elect the Christian Gnostic teacher and philosopher Valentinus as the first bishop of Rome during the 2nd century, and it was more so Valentinus' declining of the candidacy that had him not become bishop of Rome. Now, of course, the key distinctions between what later became Orthodox Christianity as we know it today and Gnosticism should be made clear. While Orthodox Christians believed the world was taken over by an evil being, the Gnostics believed the world was created by a blind, misguided, selfish, lesser God from the very beginning, and the welfare of mankind was never its concern. And it's an evil God most people ignorantly worship. Doesn't get more black pill than that. And it's hard not to hear Schopenhauer somewhere in there echoing similar sentiments millennia later. As a matter of fact, mankind were to be prey and toys for this lesser God's agenda. This lesser God Gnostics referred to as the demiurge, quote unquote, who embodied the nature of all tyrannical forces, governments, and deities on earth, including the biblical God himself, along with his quote unquote archons who help him rule. According to Gnostic philosophy, everything we see and experience in this physical and even astral planes, including our very bodies, are the result of this demiurge's conjuring. And just like some Buddhist doctrines about the wheel of samsara and everything in this illusionary world, we are taught not to be attracted to it or anything here if we want to escape the domain of this demiurge who was created by accident by the feminine embodiment of wisdom in Greek, known as the Aeon Sophia. Hard not to hear Sharon echoing similar sentiments millennia later. The term demiurge was derived from Plato and his writing known as Timaeus around 360 BC. The word demiurge means craftsman, and in Plato's original Greek version was not necessarily an evil figure, but a lesser created being from the Platonic monad nonetheless. So between Buddhism, Christianity, Gnosticism, and all the way down to some of the modern day philosophers mentioned, we see how viewing this reality as fundamentally flawed and not in our best interest and even willed by evil is far from a new development. Yet still we see when someone expresses their skepticism, suspicions, lack of attachment, and lack of enthusiasm to engage with this reality, they're usually labeled as emotionally or mentally off by most people. Depression is a serious issue that affects millions of people. Oftentimes, it can be the result of multiple biological, psychological, or traumatic factors. But what's often overlooked are the cases where the depression simply stems from seeing the world for what it is more than most and realizing the flawed design that makes happiness and positive things fleeting and even elusive for most. Most people will simply recommend thinking positive. And while I do recommend a person should think as positive as possible as well, it's not to be in denial or become ensconced in this reality, or to even think it'll change anything. It would simply be because negative thinking forfeits any chance to take advantage of anything that can help overcome this reality. And yes, there are people who love the design of this reality, but it's usually as long as they feel as if they're doing well or unaware of the overall state of affairs of others in the world. Or they might simply lack a strong sense of compassion or empathy. There are many people in this reality living unimaginable existences, till even sleep is no relief for them, even when they're able to sleep. In a reality where Murphy's Law is apparent every day, where the worst suffering can happen does happen, some people might really believe there's a good reason for this reality being designed the way it is, or they might believe it's a fixable situation in this realm. Sometimes being in denial is all they can see themselves doing to keep going. Whichever of these reasons it is, the most common reason in my experience a person might label something wrong with an individual who's not enthused with this reality they're living in is Stockholm Syndrome and its many manifestations. The term gaslighting, quote unquote, which is so commonly used today in the context of manipulating someone into denying reality and or making someone feel unsure of their sanity by having reasonable concerns or suspicions about someone or something, is derived from a 1944 American film called Gaslight, where a husband does these very same things to his wife by playing on her sanity so he can get away with misdeeds without her reacting. A lot of self-honesty and inner searching should be done before ever determining if you're being gaslighted or not. But from my experience and perspective, if someone is trying to convince you that the design of this reality should be accepted and or loved the way that they claim to love and accept it in order for you to be considered mentally or emotionally healthy, and the design of this reality is for your ultimate good, whether they're aware of it or not, you're probably being gaslit.